Okay, welcome. Welcome, everyone. I am so glad to be here again on another blessed Wednesday as we talk together about what more we can do together here at the Movement Cafe, which is part of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And your Movement Cafe team is Don Lewis and Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt and myself. And we always want to invite you to, if you have anything that you need to ping one of us, it's probably better if you ping Don or Kathy, as I tend to have a few things going in my brain at once, but you can ping me also, and always glad to do what I can. We are so glad to be here today to talk about like what do real solutions look like. There's so many different ways that climate change impacts the world, so many ways that our faith can help us understand what's happening and what our response might be to it. And then there's some of those practical things. How many trees planted? What does what would it really mean to solarize a lot of things? What would it mean for the transition? What does all of that mean? And how can it go together? And so we have invited Bill Middlecamp here to help us walk through some of those solutions in a pretty practiced way. Bill has done this. He knows what he's talking about, which is really helpful. And also Lindsay is here. Lindsay Ready is here as well. And she's going to give us a taster teaser of what is possible. And we are just celebrating, of course, all the work that you're doing, but the work that's being done. So my name is Rashenda, and I am actually here today on the westernmost point of the continuous United States in a place called Port Orford on the Oregon coast. And I live in Oregon, but I get to look out at the whales today. There's a whale researching team right in front of me there. And then open coast, we're on a little bit of a cliff. So we're overlooking the water and something called the Oregon Stacks, which are those big, big boulders that are in the middle of the ocean. So I'm having a blast. I encourage you to share who you are, where you are. You can share what church you serve. You can share if you are a United Methodist Global Ministries EarthKeeper, which I am, and Kathy and Don are both Global Ministries EarthKeepers. I see we have some of those on this call as well. So please share about yourself. And I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to tell us a little bit more about the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement.
Hi, folks. It's great to see such a great turnout today. I'm thinking this is going to be a really helpful conversation. Greetings from Minnesota. I'm Kathy Velasquez Eberhardt, a United Methodist layperson and commissioned Earthkeeper, and one of many who have helped bring this creation justice movement together. And that's been around for about 5 years. So many of you may have heard this little piece about who we are, but I always like to introduce kind of the beginnings of it. The United Methodist Church really does have a rich history of affirming our vocation of creation justice that calls all of us into better relationship with our creation. And in recent years, as we've identified the urgency of climate change, of environmental injustices, biodiversity losses, other kinds of major issues, we've really felt increased urgency to take action. And so about 5 years ago, as folks were finding each other at conferences, at Earthkeepers trainings, we realized we need to do more. And as such, we created a new network to connect the many different pieces of the church, whether it's the Global Ministries Earthkeepers, United Women in Faith, who've been doing this work for so long, church and society folks, our annual conference and local church leaders. So many people have been doing this work, and this network and this movement has been brought together to enhance what we do together and help fill gaps where where we need resources, where we need opportunities. One of the things that emerged is our a number of work teams, some communication channels like this monthly webinar series, our monthly newsletter, all of those things. We trust that you're connected to those things or will be as you learn more about us. And so today we are going to turn to a particular topic. It's really a second part to, we were fortunate to have Bill Middlecamp with us in March. I've had the pleasure of knowing Bill for more than 10 years now, as he's an Earthkeeper here in the Minnesota Conference also. And so we had him in March talk about the science of climate change, and we knew then that there was a lot there that we wanted to spend some more time on. And as a result, we're bringing him back for a deep dive into the climate solutions as well. This is a particularly important time in that there's so many rollbacks on what actions being taken around climate, and yet things are still possible. And the people in the United Methodist Church, the institutions, the structures, the conferences, the individuals, there's all things that we can do. And so I look forward to this conversation where we really do a deep dive into what those solutions are and how we might use them. And now I'm going to turn it back to you, Rashinda.
Awesome. I know this is such a great movement. I love it so much. And let's jump into our presenters today. And so I want to introduce to you Lindsay Ready as a lifelong member of the United Methodist Church and serves as a staff accountant for the Missouri Annual Conference, where she has worked for nearly 8 years. In addition to her financial responsibilities, Lindsay is deeply committed to environmental stewardship. And she has supported the conference's sustainability efforts through partnerships with a composting company, transitioning all office lighting to energy efficient LEDs, and participating in city recycling programs. And in October, Lindsay will make that commitment, even take it one more step forward by attending the Earth Keepers training in October in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to my neck of the woods in October, Lindsay.
Thank
So
you.
I am going to turn it over to you, and I'm so glad you're with us.
Well, thank you for having me. First, I want to say hello to all my Missouri Annual Conference folks that I see on here. Thank you for coming to listen. We have just finished the end of last year, December, making our conference office solar. It was a arduous process. My background comes from um, government procurement and governmental accounting. So I was probably well suited for the job and that it was not daunting to me as it could be to others. Um, so I just took it one step at a time. I started with bids. I talked to the trustees. We get everyone on board. So then we have a contract, we have everything, and then we get everything installed and it's great. And I'm going to tell you about the amazing measurable outcomes that have happened since we put solar on our building. Um, and I sent them lots of pictures. I am not very good with Zoom, so they're just going to put them up in whatever order that they want to, and I'll tell you exactly what's going on. So here's our contractor. He was amazing. Got on our roof, had to figure out what kind of shingles we had, what was going on underneath the shingles, had to see where the sun hit, where we get the best bang for our buck. It was, so you can see he's actually in the snow now. Um, he had to drill into our joists to make sure our panels were correctly um, connected to pass city inspections. So when you think of a project like this, it's already scary enough when you think, oh my gosh, we're putting so much money on the line, and then you not only then have government to work with, city government. That's why the vendor you choose is so important. And here's what it looks like now. We kind of have two wings in Missouri. To the left is what we call the Episcopal wing. That's where the bishop, yes, that's where the bishop's office is. Um, and you can see the solar over there. And then on the other half of the building, that's where all the conference staff is. I'm actually, you can see my window right there. I'd wave, but it's a picture. Um, so we have panels anywhere that it would be um, a great financial choice to us to really um, maximize our our um, our solar power, our our gain, maximize our financial benefit. And that's kind of the end of the building. At the very end of our building, we have a very large, we have an Umcor warehouse. So it's just this very large warehouse room, high ceilings, forklifts in there to move pallets up and down. Um, It was as energy as efficient as we could be, but a big concrete room that's 3 stories tall that you're moving buckets around, and sometimes they're flood buckets. It's You want to do even more to make it even more um, financially attainable so we can continue providing that service and be stewards of the environment like our social guidelines say we should. These are what are on the outside of the building. These, I think they call them inverters. These are what the solar goes in, and that's where it's actually transferred to a usable electric current. What it, so okay, so here you can see under the word status, you see 5 gold. I took this morning, so it was around 7:30 Central. You can see those 5 inverters each have their own name and a check mark. If one goes red, I just call the vendor and I'm like, it's red. What does that mean? And he comes by and does something and it fixes it. But it can tell you, you can see better on active power on the bottom. That was yesterday. So you can see as the sun comes up, as the day goes, and then it comes back down. And then you can see our day just starting off in the morning. And you can see in real time how much you're producing. So it's very cool. It also tells you today, which was, what did I say, 7:30 Central Time. Um, we avoided 7 pounds um of CO2 avoidance. So for the whole year, gosh, I can it's yeah, it measures it in let me look. I don't know what that measurement means, to be honest. TN.sh, but it's 48.38 and it has a leaf and the marketing gets me. So I think it's great. Um, we have, we're fortunate enough to have a very nice building. Um, and we have, we, we want to keep it nice. We want to keep all our amenities, but we don't want to forget the more electricity we have, the more centralized meetings we have, the more people drive to our building, the more things like that do affect the environment. So by putting solar on, we can offset a little bit of those necessary things that we need to do as a conference office. We're United Methodist. We need to be connected, and not just through Zoom all the time. We need to be connected. So some of these things, we want to have meetings. We want to see people in our building. Um, so we don't open at 8, close to 5. Heat goes off, air goes off, and then it turns back on. We have events over the weekend. We have things that happen all the time here. So the solar has helped us financially get ahead of our bills. So when you do solar, you get something called it's like a two-way meter on your house. It measures all the electric that goes through, right, that you're going to pay for, just like your house. But then we create some days more energy than we use. So we use no energy from the city utility company, and we send that back to them. So when we send it back to them, then we get a credit. And we can use those credits on rainy days, on we always have at least a week or two where the temperatures are in the single digits or below, and those heat pumps are humming away. So I looked at it, our last bill we've gotten, and currently we have a $993.60 credit on our electric bill. And that's because we've produced more than we've used. So financially, yes, that's amazing. But that number also tells me that since we're producing more than we use, we are not adding to the madness that is created by pulling all this electricity, creating all this CO2. I have solar on my house. My app actually tells me I have it set to tell me the equivalent of how many trees have been planted since I've put solar on my house. So I like to think like that. So while this is a number, it also is kind of a radar to say, hey, we're doing pretty good. Um, Trustees on the
Lindsay,
building.
did you say that it was the second biggest solar installation in your town? Was I'm trying to
It is.
remember.
It is. So Columbia is very center of the state between St. Louis and Kansas City. We're a college town. University of Missouri's here. So when college is in, we're hustling, bustling everywhere. When college is out, traffic's much better. Um, but I don't know what our population is with the students, but we're over 100,000 without them, I believe. So we're not small. We're not big, but we're not small. Um, we're a smaller city, I would say. Um, and we have the second largest system in the city. And since it was so large, that's when the city government came into play, not just with inspections, making sure everything's safe. The city council had to actually be briefed on our project and asked why we wanted to do this. And we had to explain to them why we wanted to do this, because then we're not going to be using their services as much. We're going to be doing some on our own. And then they went into closed session to vote on it. For those interested, our system is, I have so much. Okay, here's our contract. Our system is, we have 325 panels. And it's 136.5 kilowatts. So, the city, I wasn't in the room, it was closed session, but there were no issues that I was made aware of. So we are lucky we live in a city that supports this. We got a rebate from the city, as well as I did the federal tax rebate at the beginning of the year. So the you have your contract price, which is a scary price, especially when we're talking. I've been United Methodist my whole life, so these are people's apportionments. These are my apportionments. This is my money too. Is this what I would want my money to go with? And then I look at the contract price and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of trust for the people in our conference to put on us. And then to say, well, this is the cost, but yes, and I can continue to do the rebates and get this, and then I can get it down to this. Well, that was also a lot of trust. And I think that's where um, I'll answer that question in just a second. I think that is where our connectional system really helped me. There are so many people out there that you don't even know that they're in our community, and then you just start kind of poking here and there, and they come out of nowhere, and they can say, hey, we did it this way. Hey, we did it this way. Some of you guys might not have even known that Missouri did this. So hey, I'm one more person that you can now contact who's done it, who's been through the whole thing, and can maybe offer you some guidance. So using just round big numbers, the total cost of our installation was $300,000-ish. So I had to go in the trustees meeting and say, guys and gals, I want to use $300,000 of everybody, because everyone there is United Methodist too, of all our apportionments, to do this project. And on top of that, I'm going to tell you I can get us rebates too. Now that's trust. We're lucky we
That's
live in a city that also supports this. So we maxed out the city rebate since our system is so big, and we got $50,000 from the city. And
so
then
that's
I filed for the federal rebate, and I got $130,000 back from the feds. That was an adventure because we the history of our conference, I don't think we've ever filed a 990T. We stay as far away from anything like that as we can on purpose. Um, so that was an adventure in and of itself. Um, and there are little little things that can up your rebate. You can get 10% if you're in this area of the map, or if you pre-register with the Department of Energy, you can get even more things like that. I didn't know all this when I started, but I do know it now.
I'm going to jump in real quick and I'm going to invite folks with more particular questions to go ahead and go ahead into because this, like Lindsay said, it's so deep and rich and there's so much stuff we could really, and we will. We know, knowing this, we have planned for next Movement Cafe to talk about this even more. And I love what Lindsay says here about the trust that she's established, that the church has established. This is a Methodist Conference Center, United Methodist Conference Center, that has done this with the initial price tag of $300,000, which scares the tar out of every trustee on both sides of the Mississippi River. But talking through it, working through it becomes more doable, and that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna transfer us over to Bill, and Bill's going to walk through some of the why, what the solutions are, what it could look like, how we can talk about it, why we can go to the trustees with some surety that this is a good path forward. Lindsay talks about the actual pounds of carbon that are being saved. That's really good information to bring to the trustees. So I'm going to introduce Bill real quick. Bill was here with us a couple of in March, talking about sort of the foundational science of climate change. So if you're curious about that, look up that Movement Cafe. It is recorded. Bill Middlecamp is a trained engineer who has training also in meteorology. He currently serves as an elected member of the Great River Energy Board and Dakota Electric Association Board. He is a United Methodist and commissioned Global Ministries EarthKeeper. And Bill, I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rashenda, and thank you, Lindsay, for that exciting presentation. When Lindsay told me about this the other day, I went to a website called PV Watts, PVWATTS, and just plugged in a little bit of information about her project, and it came back with a number for how much energy that project could produce per year. And it amounts to about 23 times what an individual home would use. So that center is producing energy that it flows out sometimes when they produce more than they need and supplies their neighbors, the closest neighbors, and avoids the cost of transmitting energy over transmission lines and serves a community of 23,000. So when you take that $300,000 price tag and divide it, by 23, it comes up with, a little over $2,000 per home, which is a pretty good deal. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that anymore, but just to sort of foreshadow my love, my passion for science and technology, and that brings us to this tool, En-ROADS. In the presentation I did in March, I did talk a lot about the science of climate and the impacts, how it affects us, how it affects those who we should care about. And I touched a little bit on this tool called En-ROADS. What is En-ROADS? En-ROADS is a free service that's on the web. You can use it from a computer, not from a phone or an iPad. Those don't have quite enough power to run this application, but it's web-based, so you can do whatever you like without installing any software. It encapsulates a tremendous amount of information, and it's constantly being updated. I just looked, and Over the last year, there have been 10 updates. There's typically somewhere around 10 to 12 updates per year. So as the science evolves, as the situation on the ground evolves, the people who are responsible for this tool keep bringing in more information and refining the tool. Every time I open it up, I see that there's a little bit of difference in the outcome at the end of the forecast period. This tool doesn't actually forecast what's going to happen at the end of the century. It's designed to run for 100 years from 2000 to 2100. And the last 25 years, the history, the tool has been tuned to match that so that what it predicts going forward is likely to be close to reality. But the fact is, reality depends on what we do as humans, the decisions we make. And so the creators of En-ROADS produced this tool to help policymakers to understand what the impacts are for different ideas that they might have. And it helps to adjust people's assumptions. So we might get excited, for example, about building a lot of nuclear power because nuclear power is reliable, it's always on, it's always available. It's what we call baseload power. It's dispatchable, which means when you need it, you can call on it. And so a lot of people like that, right? Well, what happens if we pour a lot of money into nuclear energy and assume that there's going to be some advancements that are made? Well, we can analyze that with this tool. It's called a dynamics model, a systems dynamics model, because it takes all of the different interactions and it brings them together and does on the order of 14,000 calculations every time you change a parameter. So it's like if you understood everything that the science can tell you about not only the environment, climate change, but also engineering, power systems, economics, lots of different factors, and you could keep all that in your head. And whenever you thought about one, you would automatically adjust all the others. Well, that's what this tool does for you. So you can see the net, the result, the end result of any choices that you might make. So it analyzes the behavior of complex global systems, and it's a global tool. I want to be clear about that. The ability to do it on just like a Missouri or a Minnesota or a United States would require a lot more computing, a lot more investment. So this model applies to the whole world. And that's okay because when you decide as a government or as a community that you're going to invest in renewable energy, you want to know if you're really pushing the ship in the right direction, if you're pushing it in the direction that we all want to go, or if you're not really helping or maybe even pushing against the direction you want to go. So this tool will helpfully coordinate those kind of thoughts across the globe. As I said, it's not a prediction. That depends on what we as humans do. But it does help us adjust our assumptions and increases our ability to understand the choices and helps us focus on where we want to put our energy as we go out in the world and we try to convince people to do things that are going to make a real difference. It's free, it's easy to use, there's no wrong thing you can do in it, and it's undergoing constant development. All right, so this is what the tool looks like. And I want to point out that this number over on the right here, the temperature rise expected by the end of 2100, that actually has been going down. Every time I open this tool, I look at that first and I see that the changes we're making are actually helping. You see at the very end of the curve on the right where it starts to curve down, it reaches a peak and starts to curve down. That didn't used to be there. So that says the things we're doing are actually making a difference. And they're bringing that data into this program and constantly updating it. So just a little quick overview. You've got the ability to have two graphs up here. You can choose from a lot of different graphs up at the top of each one. You can also, there's a little button here that allows you to get something like a dozen or 10 graphs all at the same time. And so you can see a lot of things. The black line in the graph on the right, that shows what the status quo is. So if we don't change anything, this is a trajectory that we're on. The blue line is the result of changes that we make by sliding the knobs that are on the bottom. The bottom half is all the different things that we can make choices about. So for example, on the left, we have energy supply, coal, oil, natural gas, bioenergy, renewables, nuclear, something that hasn't been invented yet called new zero carbon. And this overall kind of tax-based or fee-based system called carbon price, those affect where we get our energy from. We can incentivize or we can tax each of those different sliders. And in the middle, we have things that we use energy for, and some really big ones, of course, transportation and buildings and industry. Then we can choose to make those more efficient, and we can choose to electrify them. So there's fine granularity there. And then on the bottom, these growth for population and economics, those are things that whatever we're doing in society, we do more of it if we have more people, we do less of it if we have less people. Same with economic growth. If we do more economic growth, we impact these things. We use more energy, we use more fuel, so on and so on. So we can slide those and see what effect those have as well. And then on the far right are the sources of greenhouse gases and the ways that we can reduce and actually carbon sources, carbon sinks. We can take carbon out of the atmosphere with certain technologies and practices, or we can add carbon to the atmosphere or greenhouse gases, which are measured in carbon dioxide equivalents. So we've got all these knobs, all right? I want to go under the covers a little bit before I start playing with those knobs, but I'll just introduce this a little bit, that this is meant to be a very interactive session. So as we get to actually using the tool and sliding some of those knobs, I want you to interrupt me anytime you have a thought, anytime you have a question, because really what this is meant for is for you to test your ideas and to test your assumptions and then see if you can improve your knowledge based on the information that's built into this tool. My role here is what's called an ambassador. I'm here to help you understand the results you're getting. So it's a conversation, all right? But I want to point out some of the features of the tool by talking about the dynamics that it takes into account. First of all, there's this idea that any change you make takes time. You know, if we build a new power plant today, if we build a new coal-fired power plant, we expect that coal-fired power plant to last maybe 50 or 75 years. And so that thing's going to be spewing out carbon dioxide for a long time to come. It's similarly, if we decide, okay, we're going to make every car electric, it takes time. People have just bought a car, they expect that car to last maybe 15 years. So there's a stock turnover effect that's built into the tool. So it doesn't just immediately say, when you slide the knob saying, I want to electrify transportation, it doesn't immediately make all the cars electric and all the planes and all the ships and the trains and boats. But it recognizes that it takes time to make change. That's economics, fundamental economics. The effect of price and demand, again, economics. If you, for example, build more nuclear energy, yes, it's pretty carbon free, pretty low carbon, but it's more expensive. So that causes people to spend more money trying to save money. They're going to spend more money in fossil fuels. So instead of perhaps converting a factory from using methane, natural gas in their production, switching over to using electric as a cleaner alternative, they're less likely to do that if the electricity is more expensive. So when you make a choice to build a lot of expensive electricity, you're going to see that is not going to have as much effect on the final outcome as you might like. Price demand feedback loop weakens some of the positive effects. You know, for example, renewable energy or other low carbon, lower zero carbon forms of energy only help the climate when they replace coal, oil, or gas, preventing those from emitting greenhouse gases. So again, that time factor of how long it takes to turn over the capital stock, and also the cost of it, and whether it's cheaper or more expensive than other sources of energy. When you subsidize renewable or nuclear energy, you add a breakthrough in a new zero carbon source of energy that is very cheap. This lowers the overall cost of energy and demand goes up. You'll see these effects, all right? Competition between energy sources, crowding out and squeezing the balloon. Many assume that if the world promoted several long-term zero carbon energy sources such as nuclear, wind, and solar, their contribution to carbon mitigation would be additive. Instead, they actually compete. And actually, this is one of my pet peeves about nuclear is that people are saying, well, you can't really have renewable energy because it's not reliable. You can't dispatch it. We need reliable energy, so let's go with nuclear. Well, nuclear costs money, takes time, so that means we spend more time burning fossil fuels. Complementary policies, electrification. One of the effects you'll see is if you just cause through tax incentives or penalties, fees, if you cause a carbon-based or greenhouse gas-based energy sources to become more expensive, you're not going to see as much benefit unless you also electrify the things that use energy. So you can say, I'm going to heavily promote renewable energy. You'll get a lot more benefit if you also, at the same time, electrify cars or transportation and buildings. Economies of scale and learning. This is an important factor that, again, is built into the tool. These are some of the dynamics that the tool automatically takes into account. Cumulative experience has a cost reduction over time. The cost reduction of renewable energies has recently been to about 20%. As we build more, we get better at it. We build economies of scale. We learn things. We make systems better. That's pretty good with renewable energy. It's pretty poor with coal. Coal is such an established technology, such an old technology, that as we build more coal-fired power plants, we only increase this return by about 2%. And this is just some of the information that you can get by looking under the covers. I don't want to spend a lot of time on these things. I'm just trying to whet your appetite for what you can find if you dig into this tool. But the results of studying the information and using this as a resource, and I kind of think of it as like a pocket reference for everything I want to know and talk about in climate change, because so much is built into the tool. But it addresses questions such as, why should we have hope? How can we afford this? And aren't the costs prohibitive? You'll hear a lot of economists say that it's going to cost us a lot of money to transition. The reality is, when you really dig into it, it costs us money not to transition. All right. This is talking about actually the cost of not addressing climate change. The increases in temperature impacts the climate. That impacts global GDP. It actually depresses global GDP. That increases energy demand as well, because as the world gets hotter, we need to mitigate that. We use more air conditioning. That produces more greenhouse gases, which increases the temperature change, and so on. All right, does En-ROADS account for the costs of climate change impacts? Why do carbon removal actions increase energy consumption or carbon dioxide emissions from energy? These are some of the questions that might be on your mind, and we can discuss them if they are. Why does action on agricultural emissions or waste and leakage increase energy consumption? So I want to talk a little bit about extreme temperatures, because this is a new thing that was recently added to the En-ROADS model. They use a wet bulb temperature of 76 degrees Fahrenheit as a threshold. I believe, I'm hypothesizing here, that that is the point at which it's unsafe to work outdoors. Okay, so that's a major factor. As the temperature goes up, we're more uncomfortable, of course. But as the humidity goes up, our ability to keep our bodies cool, to protect our organs, to protect our brain, that is under threat. It's at risk. When I give my presentation on the causes and impacts, I always like to talk about Corey Stringer, a Minnesota Vikings football player who died a few years ago during training camp practice in Mankato, Minnesota. Mankato, Minnesota is in the corn growing area. Corn, as you may know, produces a tremendous amount of humidity through a process called evapotranspiration. It wasn't a particularly hot day, but it was a very humid day. And so as he was practicing in his full gear and pushing himself as hard as he could, trying to tough through the pain, he collapsed. They called the 911. They called for an ambulance. He woke up. He got up. He walked to the ambulance. They rushed him to the hospital. They did everything they could to cool him down, and he died anyway. So that's the kind of risk that is really not getting as much attention as it should about the changes in climate change. And I like to ride my bike across Iowa every summer. This thing called RAGBRAI, Registers Annual Great Bike Ride Across Iowa. It's always the last full week of July, very hot. Uh, this year, 2 people died. And those 2 people, one of them, it's pretty clear that that person died because of heat stress. The other one, it sounds like they're still doing an autopsy. Maybe he had a heart attack, but I'm also I believe that the heat stress could have led to that heart attack, right? So we got to watch out for these things, especially for people who are in parts of the world where they don't have the technology to protect themselves from extreme heat. They might be outdoors all day, every day. They might not have any air conditioning. All right, and this is a very key message here that adaptation measures can increase emissions. So again, if we are trying to adapt by adding more air conditioning, and that means we generate more consumption, we use more electricity, we produce more greenhouse gases. All right, I'm now going to switch to the actual model. And I have a web browser popped up here. And there it is. Okay. I want to show you that set of graphs here. You can look at a whole bunch of things at the same time. And I'm just going to change this carbon price one. This is kind of a favorite of mine. It's a system by which you tax the things that increase greenhouse gases at the mine, at the wellhead. You do it on a per ton of carbon. It's actually not a tax. It's because it doesn't go in to the government coffers. It's a fee, which is then returned to the population on a per capita basis. So whether you're Elon Musk, or whether you're Bill Middlecamp, or whether you're somebody who's much less fortunate than I am, we all get the same amount of money back. It's divided out and given back. So all the money you collect is given back, and then people can use that to help adjust to whatever the environment is doing to their way of life. There's a little thing here, this replay loop. I can click that and you'll see it go through the changes 3 times. And just watch some of these graphs as we go through that one change. All right. You see um, you see the blue line diverge from the black line. Remember, the black line is status quo. The blue line is what happens as a result of the changes we make. For example, over on the right, the second from the bottom row, second from the right, greenhouse gas net emissions by gas. You see how by taxing or disincentivizing the use of carbon-based energy, we could dramatically lower the amount of greenhouse gases that are produced with that one policy change, okay? All right, that just gives you a sampling of what it looks like to watch a bunch of graphs at the same time. All right, let's go back to the main graphs, defaults. I want to show you how you have, first of all, lots of choices of graphs. The impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, each of these major categories has a whole bunch of subcategories. Carbon dioxide, primary energy demand totals and types, final energy consumption totals and types, land, forestry and food, carbon dioxide, population, GDP, financial. Look at all these different things you can look at. Model comparison over history. All right, let's just go back to the generic one. Let's just go back to the default graphs. You can also look at a better definition, a longer definition of what that graph is showing you by clicking that little flippy triangle over on the left. And you'll notice that down at the bottom, it tells us where it gets its sources from. This is heavily referenced. It works with the best models that do the heavy lifting. It is parameterized to mimic those models. It doesn't do the same thing as these heavy lifting models. Those require supercomputers and lots of time processing information. But this model, this dynamic system solution, or system dynamics solutions, it is parameterized to match those as closely as possible. And they're constantly checking how those parameters are working. All right. What else? When you look at the individual sliders, you can move them a little bit, you can move them a lot. You can see what impacts there are. For example, if we heavily tax coal, the source of energy at the bottom on the left chart is coal is brown. You see that it shrunk down way down mid-century, because remember, it takes time to turn over the capital stock. As you look at this, as you look at the effects of your change, it's important to look both at the total result at the end and to look at when the effect occurs. You'll notice that with disincentivizing coal, you don't really see much of a change until maybe 10 years from now. 5 to 10 years from now, you can see kind of how it bends. The curve bends around 2030, 2035, and you don't really reach a minimum until you get to around 2050. And then you see it starts to grow again. And that is based on economics growth and population growth. So these are some of the effects you can watch for. As you look at these individual sliders, you can also go under the covers and see a description of what the slider does, and you can override the defaults. So this model, the system is actually very conservative in the assumptions that it makes. But if you want to really push things and say, well, what if we had a Manhattan project for decarbonizing energy? I really want to push everything to the max. Let's say we really move the politics of this country and everybody's pushing in the same direction. You can come in there and you can modify these assumptions. All right. Oh, and then this is kind of cool. It shows you, as you're playing with these assumptions under the covers, you get the coal energy graph, that specific graph that's directly related to the slider that you're manipulating. And you can see how the current scenario compares to the baseline. All right. So are there any questions, any suggestions? Is there something that you've been a fan of, or maybe you've been opposed to? That's probably a better place to start. Is there a policy that you think is least likely to be helpful? And we can look at that. If somebody wants to make a suggestion, remember this is meant to be as interactive as possible. Somebody wants to make a suggestion about a policy they think they really are skeptical about. They really don't think it's going to help much. All right, Rashenda?
Yeah, I mean, we're arguing right now about natural gas and how much natural gas we should or shouldn't be pumping, or whether it should be scaled down. And I'm sorry that the coal makes, not enough difference, right? We're not getting enough traction. I think from my perspective, what happens when we work with the natural gas number?
So do you want to incentivize it or discourage the use of natural
Discourage
gas?
the use of it, yeah,
Okay. Well,
because
let
that's
me
where the
ask you.
beautiful solar arrays come in.
So let me ask you, yeah, what are some of the assumptions you have about natural gas? What are some of the messages you've heard?
Well, what they say is that it's less dirty than other items, which of course isn't true. And that it's important for the American economy to pump more natural gas. And of course, fracking is essential for national security. So those are the talking points from the
Hmm.
policy side, which I don't agree with, and it doesn't seem to me that those hold out. Instead, I
Hmm.
think phasing out rapidly, which means no new pipelines, don't try to squeeze more gas through an old pipeline, those sorts of things that they're doing, and no more fracking would actually, with that dropping, that would push people to fill that gap with clean energy. One hopes things like solar can be put up quickly as opposed to nuclear, which takes a longer time. So those are my assumptions, that taking out natural gas would boost the quicker renewable builds like solar, and would take out aging pipelines that require a lot of money to build infrastructure for. But I mean, I could be all wet.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well, no, I think those are some very good pieces of information. First of all, yes, we are getting a message that uh, uh, methane or natural gas is a transition fuel. It's a gateway or a stepping stone to renewable energies. And that's a message that comes out a lot in the energy industries in general, but in particular in the electric industry. It is a very inexpensive source of energy. So you'll hear messages about how it's saving people money. But methane is a greenhouse gas itself. In fact, it's far more potent than carbon dioxide. And the drilling, the transportation or pumping, piping, and the use of natural gas leaks a lot of methane to the environment. And so there's an impact on the environment because of that. For example, in Boston, where my daughter lives, there's kind of a prevalent smell of the odorant that's put into natural gas. And the reason is because the pipelines are so old that they're leaking all over the city. And so we have a lot of methane leaking out into the environment. So I'm just going to go to the maximum here, and let's heavily tax or disincentivize natural gas. And what do we see happening? Okay, I'm going to press this repeat and watch that coal on the end, coal at 2100. Blue is natural gas, so you see the blue shrink. You definitely see the blue shrink. It starts shrinking again around 2030. Doesn't happen immediately. Um, and what we see is an increase in coal. We also do see an increase in the green. We see more renewables. Um, but we see more coal. We do see the net greenhouse gas emissions decrease. So even with an increase in coal, we do see a decrease in the net green when you look at the graph on the right. All right. So why is there more coal? Well, because coal is a baseline source of energy. It's one that can be called on as needed, which natural gas is serving that ability now. Um, it is not as cheap as methane. Uh, so we could take a look at the economics impact of this as well. In fact, let's just go to all those graphs and see what happens. GDP. All right, I'm going to hit that repeat. We don't see any difference in GDP. We do see an increase in the cost of electricity. Um, we see the slight increase in, well, yeah, we see a slight increase in coal. Um, Greenhouse gas net emissions by gas, we do see them go down. And temperature change, we do see a slight temperature change. Other thoughts about that?
Uh, what about electrification of transport?
Okay, very good one. What do you expect to happen?
I think over the next 20 years, we will see um, extensive electrification. And I don't know what that means in terms of your slider, but what if we slide that halfway up to total?
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good suggestion. Yes, you've recognized that it takes time. You said 20 years. Very good. It's not going to happen overnight. We we have some assumptions, I think, that you didn't state that this is going to help. This is going to reduce carbon or greenhouse gases in the environment. How much do you think it's going to matter? What percentage of greenhouse gas totals is attributable to transportation? And remember, this is transportation. This is not just electric cars. This is boats, planes, trains,
Right, right.
cars, everything. What percentage do you think is attributable to transportation? Anybody?
In the United States, I think it's 30 or 40%. I'm not sure I remember that correctly.
For transportation as a whole, I think you're probably close on that. It's about a third. Um, and in the United States, where we tend to drive more, we tend to fly more and travel more, we don't have good rail transportation. We don't have environmentally efficient, low greenhouse gas modes of transportation are not very effective in the United States. So yeah, I think it has a bigger impact in the United States than other parts of the world. So let's go ahead and slide that halfway, see what happens. All right, I'm going to press this. We see a slight decrease in greenhouse gases. And when we look at the chart on the right, we don't see that affecting the temperature. It's not significant reduction. It's not significant enough to impact the temperature at the end of the century in a displayable way. Again, we see that there is an increase in coal, a decrease in oil. That's not surprising because we use gasoline for diesel and so on for a lot of transportation. We do see a little bit of a change in methane and interestingly enough, a decrease in renewables. Hmm.
Now,
Oh,
how would that be?
I think I triggered a little bit different effect here. I got the natural gas jumping into the fray. All right, let me try that. Yeah, we see a decrease. I have a feeling that you're going to increase the amount of demand for electricity. And without building more renewables, they're going to run fossil fuel plants more heavily to provide that increased energy. That's my guess. Other thoughts?
I want to
Now,
just say that we are just about at our breakout room time, Bill, so heads up on that.
okay. Well, that's good. You can all talk about this in the breakout rooms, discuss ideas, and maybe when you come back, if you could pick somebody in each breakout room to be a spokesperson for the group, um, so that when you come back, you can give one idea of something we want to look at. There'll be a little bit of time, not a lot of time remaining, but a little bit of time for us to look a little bit more at the model. But before we go, I just want to finish the thought. If we increase renewables, now we have a much better effect. You see that the energy we need for those electric cars is being provided more and more by renewable energy. So you have to do things together. You have to do both together, right? All right, I'll stop there and let you all go to breakout rooms. Yeah, I visited some of the rooms. I didn't get to all of them, but there were a lot of great discussions going on. Um, I wanted to point out something I didn't mention earlier, that the web address for this is climateinteractive.org. And you'll see that they have several different models there. En-ROADS is the one that's prominently displayed. You can just click on that and jump right into the model. I will also point out that as you play with this, if you find a scenario where you slid the knobs and you're very interested in a particular scenario, you can save it and share it simply by copying the URL in the address bar at the top of the browser. Encoded in that URL is all the choices you've made. So you can copy and paste that into an email, send it to me, and say, hey, look at this scenario I came up with. Can you tell me what it means? And we can have a dialogue about that. Of course, you can always save it and come back to it later and continue playing with it as well. So who wants to go first?
I have some good news
All right.
that I want to share. I mean, isn't that what Christianity is all about? Sharing the good news. In my area in Florida, on September 21st, we're going to be doing a a concert in celebration of the sun. And this is an idea of Bill McKibben's. I think this is a national thing. There's celebrations all over the country. But in doing a little digging, I found out about my neighborhood. I live in the country. I know there's a solar farm going in near me, and it's 1,000 acres. Well, I found out there's another solar farm on another ranch. These are people who have cattle, so the land's been cleared and pastured for cattle. But another ranch just a little west of them that has 1,300 acres of solar panels. Now, these are the big boys. They want to control the solar power. They want to be able to charge us for it. But still, to me, that is so exciting. With less than 10 miles from my house, I can see 2,300 acres. I wanted to tell everybody that God is green.
Thank you. Someone who is a spokesperson for your group, you want to share what your group talked about and any question you may have come up with?
Yeah, Bill, Tom Thompson here from
Hey, Tom.
Plainfield United Methodist Church in Plainfield, Indiana. From our group, I think it's fair to say that there was some discussion around the skepticism that some have of science and how real is climate change and all that sort of thing. So there was one sort of question around would the powers that be really believe any of the output from the model to begin with? But then also we came around to the question of how have you seen this tool used most effectively at the local level? Because again, that's in the end where we are going to work.
Well, I think that number one, people tend to see things from their perspective, and they are going to, even if they use the tool, are going to interpret it in a way that is most aligned with their way of thinking. There is one way of using En-ROADS where you actually act as if you're in some particular role. You might be somebody in the energy industry, electricity industry. You might be somebody who's in the oil and coal industry, or you might be a leader of a country, or you might be, there's all these different roles that you can play. And then you try to put yourself in the mindset of the people in that role, and you try to come up with solutions that you think they might want to come up with. And the value in that is when you're talking to somebody, you really don't change people's minds with facts. You need to ask them questions so that they challenge their own beliefs, and then they come to the conclusions that you're trying to steer them to. Uh, so really for yourself, I think, and on a local level, the best use of this tool is to become better informed so that you're more comfortable talking about things and to help you see things from other people's perspectives, right? Because we all get stuck in uh, our confirmation bias mode of thinking. And I will say that I have tried to have sessions with legislators in Minnesota. I have had sessions with the people who are responsible for analyzing energy sources and helping to make decisions to support energy choices in the utilities industry. And it's really interesting. For example, when I was talking to those utility people, one of the questions they came up with is just how much carbon dioxide can we release? What's the budget? How much are we allowed? And I'm like, no, that's the wrong way to look at it. But they're solving a problem, and that's one of the constraints that they're working under. So I think the best way to use this tool is to have conversations, to inform yourself, and then maybe to encourage people to take another look at something where if they look at it, they're going to learn something, right? It's not just you pushing your ideology. You're not just gung-ho for a particular idea. You're actually able to ask them insightful questions and help them to challenge their own assumptions. Next question.
Well, from our breakout room, there was just Tracy Sexton and me, but Tracy was telling about work in the North Carolina conference. I think it's the East or West Conference, and that they actually have a LEED certified building. We could very much envy. And from St. Luke's and Indianapolis, we're expecting to pass our strategic plan to achieve net zero by 2050 at the governing board meeting coming up this month. So we're feeling good about having a plan, and we're working on how we can jumpstart that plan using the base of gray-haired boomers with more wealth than future generations are likely to have.
That's a very exciting thing to hear. Two things I want to take away from that. First of all, I'm sharing the model again because I want to show you how impactful working to get to net zero with buildings is. We use a tremendous amount of energy just in buildings alone. So not even electrifying, just simply making buildings more energy efficient has a dramatic impact on our energy consumption as a world, right? So that's a very good place to focus. I also want to say, however, that before I say that, because that's the bad side, I want to say that success leads to success. So actions lead to more actions. When somebody takes the first step, then they're more likely to take the second step and the third step. And it can start with something really small, like simply just changing your light bulbs to LEDs, which probably everybody's already done. But just congratulating and thanking people for taking that action. Then they're like, okay, what else could I do? And the next thing might be more of an impact. The negative thing I want to say is, and this is important, when you're talking to people, you have to try to see both sides of the conversation. If every one of us reduced our personal carbon footprint in our home, in our car, etc., to zero, we would only be 40% of the way there. 60% of our per capita carbon impact is baked into the system. So the trucks that deliver products to your house, and that's just one example. There's a lot of things in society where we expend energy and generate greenhouse gases that you don't have individual consumers consuming. It's part of the infrastructure.
I'm jumping in with our 3-minute bell. One of the things we really do here is want to end on time. So apologies to interrupt, but that's where we are right now, and we'll need a little time for prayer. So we only got like a minute and a half or so.
All right, I want to answer the question about what does En-ROAD stand for. It means energy, that's the EN, rapid overview and decision support. Kind of a mouthful, but it is an acronym. So Should I take one more question or?
Yeah, I don't know if we could. Yeah, let's try to squeeze one in. But Christine, it's got to just be real brief. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But if you want to be real
We could
brief,
go on
let's
all
try
day,
it.
right?
Of course. I mean, this stuff is so big and wide. Okay. Well, and maybe she's okay then after all. All right. So then we are at time. And of course, everybody knows how to reach us. So if you have something you want to follow up on, please do so. Please do so. This is what we do together. This is the work that we do together. And so we really, really appreciate that. So Bill has offered to pray us out today. And so I'm going to want to turn it over now to Bill to pray us out. So go ahead, Bill.
Okay, I'm just going to put my email address in so you all can contact me if you like. So this prayer comes from Fiona Murdoch, Eco Congregation, Ireland. It's titled God of the Universe. God of the universe, we thank you for your many good gifts, for the beauty of creation and its rich and varied fruits, for clean water and fresh air, for food and shelter, animals and plants. Forgive us for the times we have taken the earth's resources for granted and wasted what you have given us. Transform our hearts and minds so that we would learn to care and share, to touch the earth with gentleness and with love, respecting all living things. We pray for all those who suffer as a result of our waste, greed, and indifference. And we pray that the day would come when everyone has enough food and clean water. Help us to respect the rights of all people and all species, and help us to willingly share your gifts today and always. Amen.
Amen. And thank you so much, Bill. And thank you so much, Lindsay. Lindsay, did she have to hop on off? But we'll get to conversation is going to be even more. We're going to slide this right into next time where we're going to be talking about people who have had experiences putting some of these projects into place and seeing what those solutions add up to. If we're going to use that language of accounting and numbers, which is an important part of the language we need to use to talk about climate change. And I'm going to wave and we're going to hit the off button, which is always a little jarring, no parking lot conversations, but you know where to find us. And we're just so glad you were all here. And this was a great conversation. Thank you, Bill, so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, everybody.